Hello and welcome to Chapter 12 in your video lecture series here in the sales development process. Today we're going to talk about presentations. We've talked a lot about spin selling, and we've practiced spin selling every time we've gotten together this semester. But with regards to spin selling, once you get the needs, once you understand the needs from the prospect or the customer, then you've got to present a solution to those needs. We talked about features and benefits in the past, and we're going to talk about features and benefits in this chapter. We've also talked about different types of presentations. Really, there's three different types of presentations that a salesman could do. One would be informative, one would be persuasive, and one would be a reminder presentation. We're going to talk about all three here as we move into the chapter. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation part of the sales development process. As before, there will be a list of questions at the end. Please, you're going to take 4 questions. As you've been doing throughout the semester, please half page on each in memo format. So again, let's get started. So as I said in the introduction, today is all about creating value with the consultative presentation. We're going to talk about presentation skills. We're going to talk about creating value with the presentation and 3 different types of presentations. When we get together a week from Monday, when we get together the next time, excuse me, we are going to, I'm going to give you a module on the elements of a successful presentation, but that is a presentation when you're in front of an audience, when you're in front of the buying center, as it were. This is really going to talk about more of a face-to-face presentation as we move on. So remember, in our 6-step presentations, you've got the approach, the need discovery. That's all done through spin selling. And again, we've practiced spin selling every time we've gotten together. Now we're on the presentation, and then we're going to go into negotiation in the next chapter. So with that, there are really 3 stages for an effective presentation. Your need discovery, asking appropriate questions, and then selection of the solution. And again, as I said in the introduction, the need satisfaction presentation really consists of 3 different types of things. One of them is the informative presentation. While you're trying to inform somebody of the features and the benefits of the product or service that you're talking about, you're informing them of what's going on. You're informing them in order to try to get them to buy. The other one is persuasive presentation. The persuasive presentation is just that, trying to persuade somebody to buy. Oftentimes, the informative presentation comes first. The persuasive presentation comes second. Most large sales or most sales reps will not close the sale on the first presentation. Oftentimes, you're going to have to do 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 presentations to the same person with other people in the room. Generally speaking, the first presentation is informative. The second presentation goes more towards persuasive, reviewing the informative, and then finally the third presentation is really the reminder presentation, reminding the buying prospect or the buying center of the features and benefit in the informative and the different reasons why someone would buy this particular product. So oftentimes a sales representative needs to be very skilled at all 3, the informative presentation, the persuasive presentation, and of course the reminder presentation. So these figure 12.3 is all about guidelines for creating a presentation that adds value. On the left, and I'm not going to read it to you, you can read it yourself, but on the left-hand side there is the strategic planning for the presentation. Really, a lot of work goes into the presentation before the presentation is ever delivered or ever even written. Oftentimes, people get facts, figures, get data from the internet, get data about the industry, get data about the competitors, get data about their products. Oftentimes, in the pre-sale, People will get testimonials from other customers that they can bring. So in today's presentation, it's not like it was before. With all of the audio and visual that we have at our fingertips, tablets, computers, laptops, etc., a lot of this work is gathered, and then the presentation is very visual and audio using a tablet or using a computer or something like that in order to show testimonials and in order to show information or data from the internet or in order to show data from someone's company, etc. So in the past, when I was selling, we always had flyers, and we would sell from a flyer, and I would pass a piece of paper across the desk to somebody. This was before the internet and things like that. Now it's different. You're going to sit there, you're going to have your laptop computer open, you're going to show people things on your laptop or on your tablet. So a lot of work goes into the presentation well before the actual presentation. And then the action taken during the presentation is on the right-hand side, reestablishing the presentation, confirming buying conditions, etc., etc. Again, I'm not going to read this to you because I am confident that you can read it yourself. So really, there's two types of presentations. There's canned presentations, there's consultative presentations. Canned presentations never work. They're scripted, they're memorized, they're repetitive, they use the same thing to everybody, they use the same type of presentation to everybody. Generally speaking, a canned presentation does not take into consideration the buyer's needs, their particular wants, their particular desires, something like that. I liken a canned presentation to those telemarketing people that call you up and they immediately start talking about features and benefits of their product without asking any questions, without knowing whether you need it, whether you don't want it. Canned presentations are presentations done to a lot of people. So in that type of selling situation, you're going to speak to 100 prospects. 99 of them are going to say no. One of them are going to say yes. It's a grind. It's given to all customers the same. So that's the type of selling that I personally don't like to do. I like to do the consultative presentations where you find out somebody's needs first and then you come back in on the presentation, or you do your homework and you find out the company needs or what have you during the presentation or before the presentation, and then you use those needs as you're consulting. Consultative presentations usually take 3, 4, 5 times again to do it. The first presentation you're going to do, you're going to probably, the goal of that presentation will probably get to be another meeting with the prospect and some of the people in the buying centers, and moving on from there. You're going to use spin selling with the consultative presentation approach. You're going to use questioning. You're going to really find out the person's needs, and then you're going to sell to those person's needs. So effective presentation, slide 1 of 2, actions to make sales presentations effective. First of all, as we know, we've got to adapt it to the particular client or to the particular prospect. You can't do a canned presentation. You've got to adapt it to the particular prospect or client. And with that being said, then you also have to make sure that you understand the client's particular needs or wants. And with that being said, that's where spin selling comes in. Oftentimes you cover one idea or one need at a time. You find out a need, you uncover the need, you present to that need. Then you go back, you uncover another need, you present to that need. And then finally you summarize all the different needs and you close, either for another presentation, for another meeting, or for the sale. You oftentimes use a lot of different devices. As I said before, you'll use tablets with testimonials on it. You'll use tablets data you've gotten from the research that you've done or data that you've gotten from your company. Oftentimes people will use video testimonials. So they'll play a 30-second video testimonial right for the client on their laptop. You're going to appeal to as many different senses or as many different visual and audio devices that you can, because it makes the presentation more interactive. And the key thing, again, is interactive presentations. Remember, the client's not a dummy. They're not sitting there just watching you. You've got to make sure you draw them into the presentation by asking questions throughout the presentation, such as getting feedback. Do you understand? Can you see how this would work for you? Would it be helpful if you could have this? All those types of things are drawing your prospect. You're drawing your customer into the presentation. You're not just verbally vomiting the information to that presentation. And the more interactive you can be, and the more you can use videos, the more you can use audio, the more you can use devices, the better off. And then again, the more creative the presentation, the more you're going to get from your client. So also consider the use of humor in moderation. Remember, oftentimes humor can be offensive. So be very careful about the humor. You don't want to be Willie Loman, the back-slapping, joke-telling salesperson. That's not the way we do it anymore. We are professional salesperson people, but it would be fine to use some type of just pun or something like that in order to just break the ice or create some humor. The other thing is a correct setting or location for the presentation. Oftentimes the first presentation is going to be done in the prospect's office, but if you're going to present to a larger group, find a venue. Oftentimes you can use maybe the lunchroom of the place. I've done that before. You can use somebody's larger office. You can use out a breakout room. You can use some type of meeting room for that. Document the value of the proposition and take notes afterwards, and then send a recap to that person via email. Make sure your sales tools are working. I always say be a Boy Scout. Be prepared. The last thing you want to do is have this great audio visual presentation on your laptop and then run out of battery and not have your cord with you. So be a Boy Scout. Make sure you check all your equipment as you go forward, etc., etc. So this next slide, the demonstration worksheet, I don't put a whole lot of faith in the demonstration worksheet, but what I really like is I like the way it says feature to be demonstrated, proof, and what will I say to include the benefit. One of the things that I've talked to you about in class, and one of the things that we really need to understand, is there is a major difference between a feature and a benefit. Oftentimes, presentations fall short, and especially new sales representatives, people with not a lot of experience, fall short on their presentations because they say feature after feature after feature. One of the things that we need to make sure is we need to make sure that we understand what is the benefit of a specific feature. So if we say it's red, well, why is that good? In the prospect, how will that help the prospect? Why is that good for the prospect? So whenever we say a feature, like it's low calorie, why is that good? Now, obviously, oftentimes people think that they can, the benefit is inherent within the feature. But that's not always the case. And even if it is inherent, we say it's low calorie, that tells us that, you know, we're not going to gain as much weight, or it's healthier for us or something like that. But there's nothing wrong with saying the benefit, even though the benefit of the feature is inherent within a particular feature. So therefore, I would encourage, and I continue to encourage all new sales rep, and when I was a sales manager and training different sales representatives, I would always say that I don't want to hear a feature without a resounding benefit. And that benefit must be resounding, and that benefit must be something that the prospect or the particular customer wants to hear. So one of the reasons that I've saved this slide in this particular presentation is because I like the fact that when you're talking about features, this is the feature, here's the proof of the feature, and here is the benefit. I like the pre-work where it says, this is the feature, this is the proof, And this is how I'm going to say it. And if you write that down and you get it down before you go in, you will have your features and benefits down pat. So we also want to quantify the solution, and that's part of the spin selling. Remember we said spin, the implication, and the I is the implication, SPIN. How much is it costing you? Oftentimes a cost-benefit analysis is done, but if you can get the prospect to tell us, yeah, it's costing me money, it's costing me time, because of it I have to pay overtime, because of it I'm losing customers, and if you can get the prospect themselves to quantify the solution, and that's what spin selling teaches us. If you can get the prospect themselves to quantify the solution, you're halfway home, or as a matter of fact, you're most of the way home. So quantifying the solution, you in your mind should have why the benefit is. What is the quantifying benefit? Is it time? Is it cost? Is it defects? Is it loss of sales, etc.? And once you have that, then what we need to do is we need to ask those implication questions, the I in the spin. We need to ask the implication questions in order to quantify the solution and make sure that the prospect in their mind is quantifying the solution. Even if you have to do a back of the envelope, what I call back of the envelope, meaning estimating how much it's going to cost you, estimating how much sales. Something like, yeah, I'm probably losing 10% of my revenue because of it. That's what I call the back of the envelope. Or they might say, yeah, it's costing me 30% more just because we got to keep doing it again. Or something like that. That's what I call a back of the envelope. It's a percentage estimate. You know, it doesn't have to be exact. It could be round figures. It could be whole numbers, what have you. But if we can get the prospect themselves to start quantifying the solution, if we can get the prospect themselves to understand that it is a cost, there is some type of financial contingent that is hurting me because of their particular problem, then the solution finds its way better. So technical versus persuasive communication. Depending on the prospect, if you're talking to engineers, oftentimes they like technical. If you're talking to engineers, they like to see the technical specs, a lot of specifications, etc., etc. Persuasive is more emotional. It's more benefit emphasizing. It's more influence. It's more personal. Whereas technical is very intellectual, information driven, spec driven, etc., etc. So these are the two: technical versus persuasive communication. Oftentimes, in talking to somebody who is very technically sound, they are persuaded more by the technical aspects, the specs. How does it work? How is it going to work? And things like that. So in enhancing success with the persuasive strategy, place emphasis on relationship, but more importantly, place emphasis on the buyer's needs. Place emphasis on, this is what you've told me you needed. This we've shown you will fit that needs. Wouldn't it be helpful to have this solution in order to make sure that the problem doesn't occur again? So we're targeting not necessarily emotional links, as the book says, but we're targeting the buyer's hotspots. What is really the problem? What is the issue? If you can understand what is the situation, what is the problem? Remember spin, situation. Tell me about your business, problem. What problems you're having. Have you ever seen problems with this, etc. The implication questions, which is how much is it costing you? Do you see that you're losing sales for something like that? And then finally, the need payoff. Would it be helpful if you had a solution to that problem? That is your persuasive strategy. Using those and then continuing to go back to that as we're persuading through the sales presentation. All sales is set up through spin. And you can use spin for everything. You can use it on an interview. You can use spin for talking to you're trying to convince your spouse of something, or your kids of something, or your boss of something. If you understand the situation, if you are selling to a problem, then you are doing a persuasive presentation, and that's what helps. Use a little bit of showmanship. There's nothing wrong with that, but make sure you have your facts down. Just the facts, ma'am. As Sergeant Friday used to say on Dragnet. People don't like change. So if you're talking about a change of the way they're doing business, a change of what they're using now, a change, and all sales is change. Minimize the change. Make sure that you know that the change is going to be very easy, and it'll be a smooth transition into the change, because human beings are very resistant to change. Whenever you're selling something, you're selling a product, and that's a change. So make sure that the change and the transition of the change is very smooth, etc. And use a power associated with stories and current situation. That's why current situation is so important. And then finally, use persuasive vocabulary. Advantages: use the prospect's name a lot. Prospects like to hear their name. They like to hear the name of their company. Talk about benefits. Talk about being helpful. Talk about solutions to problems, those types of things. Don't really talk about your product. Your product is only a product. It's a thing. What you're selling is a solution to the problem. So bear that in mind. As you're talking about features and benefits of your product, you're not actually talking about your product. You're talking about the features and benefits that solves the prospect's problem. And those problems can be anywhere between physiological all the way up to self-esteem and self-actualization, as Maslow once said. And then finally, focus on benefits. And again, focus on benefits, not necessarily the benefits of your product, but the benefits that are going to help solve the solution. And again, here's a nice little worksheet of features and benefits. Make sure you don't just say features. I've talked about advertising executives who don't know the features from the benefits. And if you watch commercials, you hear feature after feature after feature with very few resounding benefits. Here are some guidelines for group presentation. I'm going to go over this very quickly because the next time we get together, I'm going to talk about elements of a successful presentation. I have presented a lot in my life, as you can tell, and I have five elements of a successful presentation I'm going to talk to you about next time. But the book goes through identifying titles and roles, making sure you're checking the meeting room in time, clear, simple, present to everybody in the room, make sure that you are not stumbling over your words, postures, things like that. And don't let anybody crash your presentation. Take long answers offline. Unless, of course, it's the highest ranking officer, and then you want to make sure, or the highest ranking person in the room, then you want to make sure that you give a glib and meaningful answer to a question. Don't rely too heavily on video, on bells and whistles in your video. We're going to talk about that in my elements of a successful presentation. Make sure that the presentation understands what we're doing here, why are we here. Clarify points, don't take too long, and don't bore them. Selling tools, tours of plants. Other selling tools are photos. Other selling tools are testimonials, reprints, catalogs, all those types of things. Should all be in soft copy form so that you can pull them out on your computer and then finally send them to them after the presentation is done. Oftentimes people are doing virtual plant tours now and having a virtual plant tour loaded on their computer so that the prospect understands their plant and they can actually give a plant tour while you're in your prospect's office. So with the use of technology, it is amazing. You can also video conference people in, such as engineers, etc., to give more technical specs, more technical details. If you've got a very technical presentation and you're not a technical person, you might want to talk to an engineer or a technical person back at your home office. and you say, I've got a sales presentation between the hours of 11 and 12 o'clock on Tuesday. Can you be available with your phone so I can video link you in case the prospect has technical questions? That is extraordinarily powerful when a prospect says, tell me about this. Instead of saying, I don't know, I'll get back to you, you can say, let me get the expert on the phone and video conference them in. If you give the expert a heads up that this might happen, they can be more prepared. And then when they ask questions, you've got something right there. So, you know, technology has changed so much since when I was a sales rep out there. And it really, really has enabled salespeople to be more comprehensive and do a better job. So here's your review questions. There's 5 of them here. Take 4 of these review questions and give me 2 pages in memo format. Thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in our last class coming up on the 25th. Take care.